other thing I was thinking about, maybe someone should make a video for artists who draw sexy men. And it might be, it's not the most obvious thing in the world to do, you know. A lot of, I don't want to say this. I mean, obviously, you have a lot of idealized men in comics, but a lot of times, sometimes you'll get, you know, your ruggedly handsome guys, of course, but more often than not, you know, at least these days, what you'll get is, you know, the badass dude, and there's tons of examples of that, but how often do you get that kind of GQ looking guy or that male model looking guy? You know, there's sure, I guess you can point to characters like Nightwing or maybe Tony Stark or whatever, but again, you know, not every artist is good at drawing, like I said, handsome guys or pretty boys or hot guys, you know what I mean? So, um, you know, I think I would like to hear people's opinions on that as well. So, you know, um, maybe that's something to try to do. I don't know. Anyway, that's what I want to say. Thanks. Have a good one. Okay, so I like shot that for another video I did that had to do with like cheesecake in comics, and yeah, so I was thinking like, yeah, I did a cheesecake video. You know, somebody should do a beefcake video, and I thought maybe I should try to do it. And when I finally sat down and tried to do it, it turned out to be a little bit more difficult than I thought it was going to be, and that's basically for a couple different reasons. One reason is the opposite of the opposite of female cheesecake is not, you know, badass dude. It's, you know, it's sexy dude, you know. And I think sometimes there's a big gray area because when it comes to like, you know, comics and superhero comics, I should say, and adventure comics and things like that, you're more than likely going to get, you know, the badass dude or whatever. And not that you can't have a guy who's super muscular and badass and still be sexy. It's just that it's more of a gray area. And I was trying to think of artists that deliberately tried to do characters to male characters and make them, you know, hot as opposed to just making them, um, you know, like I said, badass or what have you. I do think back in the past there was a lot more balance, if you will. I mean, I think you had the beautiful women on the one hand, and then you had the kind of ruggedly handsome guy on the other hand, and any sort of sexuality was kind of, you know, was really PG, you know. And I think maybe you got toward the 90s. Possibly somebody might have a different opinion or a different take on all this, but I think that's when things started getting kind of weird and maybe out of balance, with the women in their tatas getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and their suits getting skimpier, 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 and then the guys were getting bigger muscles and muscles on top of muscles and giant muscles and grim and look at me grit my teeth and giant guns and stuff like that. I think we're kind of coming out of that. I think things are a little bit more balanced these days, but yeah, it's a little bit more difficult to find stuff where the artists are, or at least in a mainstream comic, are being, like I say, trying to draw hot guys as opposed to either badass guys or, you know, classic guys, if that makes any sense. I don't know. The other side of that is, of course, me personally, I'm a heterosexual male, so the way I process these sort of ideas and concepts is probably going to be different than somebody else, you know. And then too, in either case, you know, all these sort of things about who's attractive and who's not attractive and what's hot and what's sexy, all these things are always, you know, subjective anyway. So, you know, what one person thinks is sexy and tasteful or hot or whatever is going to be different than what the other, next person things. So I'm not so sure I really succeeded 100% in what I set out to do with this video, but I am still kind of interested in what people might, you know, have to say. So I'm gonna put it up anyway. So so that's it. I'm gonna go. It's a very nice day out, so I'm gonna go enjoy life for a little bit. Then I'll come back and I'll finish editing everything, and I'll put the video up. And thanks for, you know, listening and watching, and any opinions that anybody's got to say. I welcome them. I mean, this is just, this is just a video for fun. I'm not trying to start an argument or anything. We're just trying to have fun. All right, that's it. Thanks. Okay, so now Phil Jimenez. Phil Jimenez is somebody I kind of struggled a little bit about whether or not I should put on this list. Um, Very much an old school type artist, very heavily influenced by George Perez. So again, you're going back to that whole kind of you know classic good looks, classically handsome dudes, classically beautiful women and things like that. Um, I went ahead and put them on because I think with Phil's characters, they're handsome, but they're very, for lack of a better word, I don't know, clean cut looking. uh, just very there's something pristine about his characters. There's something pristine about his figures and whatnot. Even when he's drawing somebody like Wolverine, who's supposed to be gritty and scruffy and rugged, he won't draw bad Wolverine or anything like that. But here's Wolverine with his wild hair and his leather jacket, and he still looks pretty clean. That's the only word I can think of to describe it. So, but yeah, it's a case of, once again, trying to make the characters look good in a way that's maybe appealing on a, I guess, sexual way. Stefan Stefan Cejek actually has replied to me here on YouTube and someplace, another website. I think I've written in a particular thread that if Marvel or DC ever want to do variants again, where they do maybe their cheesecake variants and then do a male beefcake variant, they should hire this guy. And he actually said, yeah, I'd be interested in doing it, if they ever call me, if I had time in my schedule. And I just thought that was nice that he replied. But yeah, when with Steven, it's very definitely about bringing the beefcake. It's very much about, musculature and that sort of lean muscles, and really trying to uh, be seductive, as opposed to just have your teeth gritted and look at me, I'm a badass. But I think he's a guy that, like I said, can pull that off, and pull it off in a very overtly sexual way when he wants to. I mean, he does do erotic art, put that in quotes, but he also does a lot of mainstream things as well. So, or I should say, well, I guess that's what I want to say. He does his more indie work and alternative comics and smaller press, as opposed to tons of Marvel and DC work. But yeah, but as far as the sake of this video, I put Steven pretty high on the list. Mike Deodato Jr. Mike Deodato Jr. is another guy I think is really interesting. He's not really my favorite guy, but like I said, he's very interesting. He's another guy that got started in the 90s, and if you look at his art then compared to what he does now, it almost looks like a completely different artist. I think the stuff he did back in the 90s is very stereotypically, is what people think of when they think of stereotypical, 90s superhero art. Um, you got people with their teeth gritted all the time, or frowning all the time, or their mouths are always open all the time, and the guys are all steroided out, and the women have legs forever, and giant cone breasts and whatnot, and kind of awkward looking poses occasionally. Um, but I think since then he's added lots of layers to his work. He's obviously gone back and looked at some of the older comic book guys. You can see a very obvious Neil Adams influence there, a really strong uh, Gene Colan influence, and I think he's really going for something that I think a lot of other people aren't. Was it's obviously comic book art that looks like comic book art. He's not really trying to draw realistically. He's trying to get across a certain sort of mood and impact, and basically that's what he's obviously trying to go for. As far as this conversation is concerned, yeah, he's somebody that draws very sensual women, but he's also draws kind of sensual men. I mean, I think he's going for trying to combine the a sort of that male machismo and aggressiveness, but at the same time make it look sexually appealing. He's not sacrificing the aggressiveness for the sexiness. I think he's trying to combine the two. And again, with the way he works with shadow and light, I mean, there's an obvious sort of I'm not too sure what word I want to use there, but that's what I want to say. The way he works with shadow and light, adds to the mood. It adds to the sensuality. So okay. But even Deodato's '90s Thor, sometimes kind of looked like a male stripper or something. Oliver Coipel, that's an artist I do like. I actually have bought one or two comics that I actually wasn't that interested in just because I like his art. As far as drawing sexy dudes, I don't know. I can't even think of anything deep to say about it. It's just guy just straight up draws people posing like they're, in Calvin Klein underwear ads or something. It is what it is. Jae Lee. Jae Lee is a guy. I wouldn't say he's really one of my favorite artists, but I do think his art has improved, by leaps and bounds since the '90s or whatever. Jae Lee is a guy that um, who can kind of work that sort of central side of comic book art. Um, whether it's through his posing or his composition or his figure works, I think is really deliberate, especially in his drawings of like Namor, that he's trying to make the character looks overtly sexy. Pete Craig Russell is somebody who's been around for a long time, since at least the early mid '70s, I'd say. Of course, he originally came to fame doing Kill Raven for Marvel, and I think when he started on that title, his style, kind of fit into the house style at the time. But by the end that title ended, his style kind of morphed a little bit more into what he kind of became a little bit more famous for doing. Of course, since then he's done lots of fantasy art. He's done lots of stuff for um, depicting the adventures of Eldrick back in the '80s. I know he's done lots of like adaptations of operas and things like that. Um, with Craig Russell, and I'm not sure how much this is really tied to his sexuality in real life, but Craig Russell will actually draw pretty men. He doesn't just draw handsome dudes. Of course, he does draw handsome dudes, but he'll draw pretty men. There's of course muscular guys, well fit, but it's always the sort of lean type of musculature. It's not bulked out, stocky guys. He'll draw like thin guys. And guys that occasionally have like kind of really, like I said, pretty faces and things like that. Really, lot of detail, lots of clean lines, but it's never overly busy. And like I said, his guys, it's all lean muscle. I mean, his guys look less like bodybuilders and more like, male gym. Okay, that's it. Like I said, this video was mostly just for fun. I welcome any sort of comments. If anybody thinks I kind of got it wrong, or if you agree with me or disagree with me, or, I would encourage anybody else to make their own video or what have you. But once again, thank you very much for listening, and you have a good day.